Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, please set your electronic devices to silent, but have them ready to email or text your questions for the panel to askmecerts@gmail.com. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Colonel Mike Warlick, U.S. Marine Corps retired Vice President, FCA International, to the stage.
Good afternoon. Sure. See, the crowd is enlightened today. Enlightened, or did I say lightened? I want to thank everybody again for being here this week. It's really a very important conference, and those that are here know that. Those that are not here, they missed a tremendous program already. So this afternoon, you heard Steve Wallace and his panel just a couple of hours ago. And I got to say that today, as compared to Monday, was a whole totally different environment in the building, both up here and down on the exhibit floor. I just made a quick run down there. You don't want to go down there right now; you get hurt because they're dropping their exhibits, and they do it so well. It takes 2 days to set up and 30 minutes to shut down, just like a deployment. But in any case, I think I appreciate you visiting the exhibitors, those that you did. They seem to be pretty pleased overall with the week. So we're happy about that, and we're looking forward to moving forward today and into tomorrow. So I'm not going to stand up here and tell jokes. I want to introduce our moderator this afternoon, Bob Casimir. Bob is the deputy to the Commandant General, Army Cyber Center of Excellence, and he's going to lead the discussion on service perspectives, execution of workforce training and education. It's a big topic. It's a big challenge. Just a little bit about Bob. He doesn't want me to say much about him, but I will say a couple things. He started his current role in February 2016. He retired as a colonel in February 2007 after more than 28 years on active duty. Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Casimir.
Okay, thank you, Mike, and I appreciate the brevity. Well, welcome, folks. This afternoon we are going to talk about the execution of training and education. We heard a lot about policy. We've heard a lot about systems of organization for civilians and others, and I think it will be very interesting to hear some service perspectives on the execution of that training, what is going right, what do we need to improve, and where did we come from, oh, by the way, on this journey to where we are today. So we have an outstanding panel of professionals, and I'll introduce them in a moment. And then I'm going to give them an opportunity to kind of lay out in very brief form an outline of their journey, their services journey in this space. So first, let me introduce Mr. Todd Boudreau. Todd is the Deputy Commandant of the Cyber and Electromagnetic Warfare School. I see General Kraft approves. And he's held that position since it started, really, since the inception. So Todd previously served as the Director of OCOS, the Office Chief of Cyber, and he acted in that capacity as the single point of contact for workforce development in all matters affecting the Signal Regiment of 59,000 plus professionals, so a very large mission. Todd served over 3 decades in uniform in numerous assignments before retiring in 2014. And he's asked me to just assure for you that his proudest achievement is his marriage to his lovely bride for over 35 years, his 2 sons, 2 daughter-in-laws, his granddaughter, and grandson. So he claims those as among his most important and precious accomplishments. Yes. All right. So next, from the United States Marine Corps, a repeat panelist here at CERTS, Colonel Joseph Broom. Colonel Broom currently serves as the commanding officer, Marine Corps Communications Electronics School, responsible for all training of Marines in communications, ground electronic repair, aviation command and control, and ground-based air defense military occupational specialties. His operational assignments include joint duty and service with all four elements of Marine Expeditionary Force in a variety of communications, networking, and cyber defense billets. So welcome, Joe. And then finally, from the United States Coast Guard, we're pleased to have Commander Lars McCarter. Commander McCarter serves as the Chief of Cyberspace Policy and Capabilities within the Coast Guard's Office of Cyber Forces. He develops cyber policy and technical capabilities for teams operating within military, civilian, critical infrastructure, and adversarial networks. He has served in cyberspace operations and engineering billets within the Coast Guard, the U.S. Cyber Command, WACA, the White House Communications Agency, and CISA, the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency. So welcome, Lars. Okay, let's give a hand. So before I ask some probing questions of our panelists, I thought I'd allow them each to have just a few moments to outline the trajectory of their service in this space. So Todd, would you lead us off, please?
Sure. First, thank you, AFCEA, for hosting this. General Lawrence, it's always good to see you. Absolutely. I will reinforce my accomplishments. Yes, 37 years married this year, and my grandkids are such accomplishments because my two sons survived. So, yes, I'm going to talk about the Cyber School. So, General, I'm going to talk very quickly about where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going. And I can do that quickly because, as General Kraft shared this morning, we're 7 years old. Although, like any good 7-year-old, I'd say 7.5, right? So we're 7.5 years old. Started in 2014. We had about 1,000 positions that were allocated to cyber within the Cyber Mission Force and then the electromagnetic warfare formations. 2015, we started the schoolhouse with just officer courses. 32 students that year, so it was a great banner year. 2016, we added warrant officers, pushing us up to almost 200 students that year. And then 2017, we added the enlisted workforce, so a little under 800 students in 2017. Between 2019 and 2021, we then took the EW training that was conducted at Fort Sill. We really transformed that, modified it, and began moving that here to Fort Gordon. And so last year, we closed up everything at Fort Sill, and our cyber warfare specialist also had training down at Pensacola, Florida. We moved that to Fort Gordon as well. And so all components of training in 2021, last year, to include the Marine Corps. We have a great partnership with the Marine Corps, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So where are we at today? So as General Kraft mentioned, we're over 5,000 positions across the Army now in all three components. We train all of the Army's cyber mission force, cyber warfare, cyberspace effects, however we want to categorize that workforce, and EW soldiers right now on Fort Gordon. We also have a great partnership with the Marine Corps, and we are beginning to train our Department of Army civilians. And so we continue to expand right now. We have several functional, or what we would call independent courses that we've stood up over the years that are focused specifically on cyber mission force training. And so as we move, we're trying to get to a point where we present fully trained, and then we'll see maybe qualified personnel to the cyber mission force. Unlike many or most Army or military training schools, we don't focus on task outcomes training, where you have a task, a condition, and standard. Works really well for something like clearing your weapon, which I understand went to basic training in 1983. I still think they used the acronym SPORTS, right? So see, something that's static and doesn't really change. That's not this environment. And so we're really on an outcomes-based Hiram Bloom's taxonomy with tested demonstrated proficiency. And so we're thickening that this year, and we're also looking at the introduction of a few more functional or independent courses specifically focused on kind of rounding out or topping out, or whatever term you would like to use, providing the additional required training for cyber personnel before they get to the operational force. I'll conclude with where we're going. And so we are looking over the next couple of years of shaping our designation as the Department of Defense Executive Agent for Advanced Cyber Training. So what that means in scope and what that means in scale. And so we're working very closely with Cyber Command. We're working very closely with the other services. And we're kind of garnering a very unique partnership with NSA in order to do this. We are on path to receive all of our brick and mortar buildings. And so if you've not been on Fort Gordon lately, you'll see a lot of scaffolding going on right now. And so we took possession of our first brick and mortar SCIF classrooms just last fall. Up until that point, we've been training in temporary buildings to include a temporary SCIF. And so we gained possession of the other 2/3 of that building later this summer, and then the first brand new building being built on Fort Gordon for the cyber campus comes to us. And so we're going to go from about 116 classrooms that we will have by the end of this year, of which 97 of them are SCIFed, up to about 148 classrooms. We're also looking at the laboratories as well. So right now we've got about 8 laboratories of various kind of types. We will end up with 24 labs, of which 21 of those are SCIFed. And then we're looking at expanding our EW training range on Fort Gordon. So right now they're in a pretty congested area. We have taken possession of a large swath of the middle of Fort Gordon, and we'll be building that out. I say that because I know we have got a lot of industry partners out here as well, and so there will be construction, there will be building of networks and so forth out there. And then finally, as we work with the academic institutions, a lot of our curriculum right now is classified. So over the next couple of years, we're looking at how we can create an unclassified variant to serve 2 purposes. Number one, it would be easier to give an articulation for the training that our soldiers receive. And number 2, we could better share that with our coalition partners. And so that's where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going to.
I may be biased, but it's a great story. Thanks, Todd. Joe, would you take on the same question?
Absolutely. So we do have a partnership with the Army, the ITRO agreement to train all of our 17 XX Marines in cyber operations, and greatly appreciate leveraging that schoolhouse instead of having to stand up a separate one for that. Our version of the Signal Schoolhouse, as you heard earlier today, is separate. It's in sunny 29 Palms. Probably not the right place for the school, but I'll come back to that. The school's big. I have the main campus, 3 satellite campuses. We pump through about 12,000 students a year. About 5,000 of those are entry level across the Marine Corps. The rest are advanced level or returning students. The Marine Corps spent the last few years modernizing its education. I mean, we took that away from an industrial model, moving more into what we call 21st century learning at the time, but it's a bit of a misnomer because we've been in the 21st century for a hot minute. It's getting rid of the rote memorization and the foot stomping that most of us in this room grew up with, and it's very much a student-focused, outcome-based skill and problem-solving ability that we're trying to build in these younger students rather than the training gear. We still finish the classes with training gear, but it's very much conceptual in the beginning of those. In MCSS, we employ a variety of instructional techniques from student-led, the traditional instructor-led as well, and group exercises, gamification, of a wide variety to produce that outcome-driven. But every single course finishes in a capstone exercise that is completely performance-based and encompasses the entire course. As I'm quite fond of saying, cooperate to graduate is dead. You must demonstrate to graduate. Any student doesn't pass the capstone is going back. It is that simple. So my goal is to turn out a ready, able Marine, trained Marine to the warfighter. And we get their feedback constantly from the fleet. That is an iterative process. And using that feedback, we have broken the 3-year course content review board cycle. For those of you that are familiar with that, 3 years in this HOC field is about 15 in another, and there's no way we could sit still for that. So we've broken that process. We update our POIs on the fly, and that's a bit of a bureaucratic change for some of the higher headquarters. my boss is very supportive of that and lets me do it. And I think we're turning out a better and more relevant student constantly to the fleet across all entry-level and advanced-level courses for that. So where we're going, I would love to move the schoolhouse. It's been there since the 50s off the top of my head, and most of my buildings are in excess of 30 to 40 years old with only one new building in 11 years. Hurricane Florence ensured that I will get no new buildings because we are completely rebuilding Camp Lejeune and Cherry Point right now. There was some talk of us moving to Fort Gordon. That would cost about $500 million to build me a new campus, and I'm not sure we can afford that currently. In the meantime, we will continue to improve on what we've got with FISRM and limited MILCON. But in the schoolhouse itself, I am taking us down a road of increased augmented reality, virtual reality training, and live virtual construct. I need a cyber range, effectively, and I need one that I don't have to own. I don't want to own stacks anymore. I want a complete training as a service environment. And if you are in the AR/VR market and can help me out building constructs for my students to practice on before they get live reps and sets on gear, I want to talk to you. So stop by and give me your card. With that, turn it back over.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Joe. There's a couple of threads that I'm going to tug on in a moment here, but before that, Lars, over to you.
Yeah, hey,
United States Coast Guard.
Good afternoon, everyone. AFCEA, thank you for having me as well. My boss sends his regards that he was unable to be here. We have a large conference out on the West Coast right now that almost everybody's at. But, yeah, I mean, I think we'll bring a slightly different perspective to the other joint services in terms of where we've come and where we're going. And I think kind of the bluff of that is we're moving from a very ad hoc training and education, footprint to something that's more formalized while maintaining kind of the dynamic nature of the domain given the small size of the service. So we like to beg, borrow, steal from everyone, right? So right now we're looking towards the future with some of the things that are coming up here in Fort Gordon and kind of aligning to those. But kind of briefly where we came from, this has been a very rapid progression in the service. I was on the stand-up of the Coast Guard Cyber Command back in 2011. So it's been, only 10 years. And at that point, we were sending the very first, member to just JCAC it with the Navy down in Pensacola. And so that's where we've traditionally been pipelining our enlisted members through without any kind of formalized training or education for the officer side of the house. It's, like I said, been very ad hoc over the last 10, but as many as 15 years. And that was primarily focused on the defense of the DoDIN, on the internal networks. But more recently, we've gotten drug into the discussion of protection of critical infrastructure and our role as a sector-specific agency under PPD 21. So we've been, the deployment of our new CPTs, we're up to 3, has become more formal in terms of following the joint requirements for standing up CPTs, but then also dynamic enough so that we're interoperable with our CISA elements that we have personnel attached to, as well as interoperate with in critical infrastructure. And so moving forward, over the next several years, in addition to kind of maturing what we're doing in critical infrastructure and the maturation of the pipelines for those individuals who are working within critical infrastructure is where we're going with OCO. So we have a full CMT coming online. Half of it's already been funded and on site. The other half's coming online, and that's where we're looking to partner with the Army and using the training pipeline that exists there. Also, ties to NSA and National Cryptologic elements. National Cryptologic School are important to us, but that's something, so we're, again, inside of 10 years, we've had to completely spin up deployable DCO capabilities as well as OCO for a service that right now is looking like only about 300 enlisted members. So we've just stood up the new cyber rating. So before that, it was all ad hoc ratings. I had bosun mates that were manning my watch floor in addition to helicopter technicians, which goes to kind of the tenacity of some of these kids to be able to reach outside of their specialty areas and bridge into something new. So many of those folks are transitioning into the new rating, where we hope they're going to be able to build on what they've learned kind of ad hoc and put them through kind of the formal pipelines and get them on mission as soon as possible. So that's where we're going, and it's been a pretty quick journey.
Lars, thank you. Okay, so I promised that I was going to try to get this to be a little provocative, pull some threads that maybe were uncomfortable Unfortunately, it seems that there's some unanimity here in the panel members, but I'm going to allow you to take a turn on this issue of jointness. So right now, many of you probably know, since I see a lot of family here, that we're under a significant construction program at Fort Gordon. We're building about $1 billion campus for cyberspace warriors, for communicators, for electronic warfare practitioners, as well as cyber operators. And so that program will take us well through building out into 28 and beyond to have the brick and mortar done. But we're already training in these dimensions. We're trying to enhance that training. So what I really want to ask the panel members is to talk a bit about that jointness. It's been said cyber is fundamentally joint. It's inherently joint. We certainly have joint standards. Talk to me about the other aspects of joint training, if you will, and what it means to have the right facilities, and whether or not in the future it's foreseeable, as was alluded to, that potentially other services could combine with us, perhaps at Fort Gordon. Todd, you want to take a crack?
Sure, why not? So I'll pull on the executive agent thread and kind of start there. So there's many things that you can say about what you put on the table. I think probably the preeminent thing about joint training is it has to be joint, right? And so I look at our partnership with the Marine Corps as an example. We have not only Marine students, we have Marine instructors in our schoolhouse. And we've partnered with them. And so it is the different perspectives that we get. What we haven't done is created something similar to a SOCOM model where you have Delta, you have Rangers, you have SEALs. We've created teams, and each team is supposed to be to a standard. Now, their application will likely change based on the threat and the environment that they're being pointed to, but the presentation of fully trained and qualified individual is expected to be at a joint standard. And so first we need to look at how we're doing joint training, which means together. Number two is I think the model is going to be different than it is today. We're looking at readiness rates. We hear General Nakasone, and everyone is rowing hard, and we're not catching up. We're not making the distance that we have to. And so we have to look at a little bit of a different framework. I think we need to leverage things that have been invested in. So I think the cyber campus on Fort Gordon is a great example. And I wish our Navy and Air Force partners were here as well. I employ them. They already sometimes call us Port Gordon. And so just because you're standing up a branch on Fort Gordon doesn't mean that you've lost. It actually means that you've taken some of our turf, and we're working together. And then finally, I think we need to look at how we pull all this together, leveraging technology like the persistent training environment. And so what is often discussed is as an executive agency, you have a single head. I've watched enough foreign movies that show me anything with more than one head is a monster, and so you've got to have somebody, right, that is kind of responsible, not in charge, but responsible. But as we bring other partners together and form that coalition. And so PCTE allows us to do that in a time-saving and a resource-saving environment. Not only training by the executive agent school on Fort Gordon, we can leverage PCTE as training from the executive agent schoolhouse to other remote campuses. So think of the airman and the soldier out at San Antonio not having to pay TDY or TAD money, but being able to be in the classroom using the same PCT instantiation, part of the class from afar. And then finally, looking at how we also leverage investments that our service partners have maybe already made, and how we have training under the executive agent. So how we certify instructors as adjunct faculty to make use of the investments at their ports, at their camps, at their stations that they've already made. And so as we look at it being it must be a joint solution, and we must look at all hands. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think that's a great rundown, and you've tied in some interesting aspects, including, of course, the persistent cyber training environment. Joe, can you add on to that? I mean, as you said, you already got a presence here. You know, you've been training your signalers for ComSat for many, many years here, and now cyber. Go ahead and take a crack, if you would, please.
Yeah, so as a smaller service, Marine Corps leverages ITRO agreements through other services to train on, so we inherently joint in our training. Obviously, several MOSs here, as we already discussed. Air Force schools at Keesler for 3 of my MOSs right there, the follow-on schools for them. And by default, I have the Defense Language Institute DED as well, simply through regionalization, even though it's not related to our MOSs. So I would say that the pooling of resources is an absolute force multiplier in an age of dwindling resources. There will always be some friction over the control of the POI, the program of instruction. If it meets a common baseline denominator, we could build upon that for service-specific things. I mean, communications in a maritime environment is different than a land environment in some areas. If you've ever tried to transition from ship to shore, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So adding to the joint training would probably be an easy bridge to cross for some of those. And I think I'm going to leave it at that.
And so for $500 million, we could get the whole thing over here. Is that
well? That's
right?
That was the cost of the full campus plus the chow hall and everything else. But I mean, I'll touch back to that for a second. So I'm out in the middle of nowhere. Okay, I can't see Hill, but it's the next hill over. I'm pretty sure it's right over there in 29 Palms. If you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who've been to NTA, it looks just like it. It's just below Joshua Tree. That comes with a huge challenge of recruiting talent for instructors. Okay, first off, a lot of Marines don't want to go there because their families don't want to go, right? It's in the middle of nowhere. Second off, the instructor pool, colleges, as far as civilian instructors, it is hard to attract talent up there unless they are already desert zombies and they love the desert and they just want to stay, right? So it would be much easier if we were in a location like Gordon, for example, to pull in talent, and especially if it's a joint school, then we're pooling that talent, not just pulling it in. So I'm a proponent of moving us. We've had a couple of spots we've thought about in Pendleton and Gordon. At any rate, I would definitely endorse a full joint approach with follow-on for Marine-specific training.
I hope we're recording this for posterity here. All right. Lars, Coast Guard. Port Gordon?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. No, so jointness is absolutely critical. We like to consider ourselves part of the joint force, regardless of where you fall in the legal discussion of that. But more than just the jointness, kind of the interagency-ness is what we have to deal with on the domestic side with DHS, et cetera. And I think, beyond just the DoD jointness, looking out across what potentially the jointness could bring to the interagency is a powerful force multiplier in of itself. For example, we talked about, CPTs deploying, for example, with CISA, right? It's impractical for a variety of training reasons primarily, and their inability to interoperate. And to have so many, DoD CPTs at the ready, knowing that there are, magnitudes less available for domestic critical infrastructure, something that's kind of a national challenge. More specifically from the Coast Guard's perspective, we are not going to do this on our own, right? We're not coming up with curriculums. So to follow what you have already developed and bring our pot of money to it just makes sense, right? And then our people will figure it out, and we'll tailor it to whatever we might need. But I think everybody should be in the idea of doing things jointly. Once we get past the whole ownership discussion, which I think you guys have more than we do. Who owns it? And executive agents of various things are important, but in the end of the day, unity of effort over unity of command generally wins the day, because everybody can't own everything. So we're all on board, and which is why we hope to have Coasties into the Army pipeline by FY24 for at least our offensive forces, and then we'll see how we work on some of the rest of the defensive forces.
So thanks, Lars. Between what you've talked about and before you, Admiral Mike Ryan, and what you do for critical infrastructure, the interagency processes and things, I mean, it's a really interesting mission set for a relatively modest service in size with some significant aspects that could really complement some of the things I know that we do. in the Army, especially with our Cyber Protection Brigade at all. Hey, at this point, I'm going to reserve some of my other questions and see what we have queued up on questions that you may have submitted, and I invite you to go ahead and, again, send your questions via email to askmecerts@gmail.com. Can I have a first question?
There is a high demand for cyber professionals giving highly qualified personnel many options. Yet, most contracts are lowest priced, technically acceptable, LPTA, making it difficult to attract the most highly skilled cyber professionals to be instructors. Is there any consideration to move away from LPTA contracts to better align with CCOE priorities and aspirations?
Okay, that one looks like it's tagged directly to the CCOE, but I'm going to allow our panelists to generalize it. So we're talking about, do you have the challenge of getting highly qualified contract instructors to augment your other instructors who may be working in your space, whether it's in communications and networking or in cyber in particular? So, Todd, since they mentioned CCOE, let's go ahead and address it while Joe and Lars, if you would contemplate that question too.
Sure. So our answer to LPTA is ARMY. And so as we build our workforce, our plan is to have more uniformed operators in front of student uniformed operators. Out of necessity, as General Kraft eloquently talked about the substantial growth to the force, we are heavily tooth and very little tail. And so we've been staffed at about 17, 20%, depending on the classes, uniformed authorizations to the numbers of requirements, and therefore we've had a substantial requirement for contracted instructors. So not contracted instruction, it's our instruction, but contracted instructors. And I'll tell you that, yes, we have had some challenges, but we've also had some rock stars. We've got a few individuals that retired from the military and became contracted instructors, and they've been there since the beginning. It's as we offer new courses and the curriculum being built and finding new industry partners to come in. And so I wouldn't say that. I think at the end, and I'll end here, at the end, we will definitely be at probably, I'd like to see a mix, and of course the Commandant can trump that, but I'd like to see a mix of about 70% uniformed instructors, and then add to that about another 10 or so % Department of the Army civilians, and then we want our contracted industry partners that we can work with to be able to look at how we churn on the margins to be able to make us better.
Okay. And before we move on, and Joe, I'll go to you next here in a moment, but just to talk about the least price, technically acceptable contractor, you know, our G8s of the world who husband the resources for the commander, you know, will tell you, hey, you can get anything you want as long as you specify what the true requirement is. And the truth is, yeah, maybe we do have some work to do on writing our requirements, at least for the contract piece. There are other vehicles, though, and we're exercising them, I think, is the key point so that we can get and maintain the right level of support we need to augment our workforce. Joe, over to you. Marine Corps, you have any challenge with that?
Well, my main location, I have no contractors. I'm 100% uniformed in GS, and the GS pool I have to pull from is typically retired guys coming back to the desert, so they're usually highly qualified. I do have a contract instructor force at the 3 satellite campuses of the MEFs. They're at Pendleton, Lejeune, and in Okinawa, and I don't have much problem attracting talent to those two, but I'll tell you, most of them are former military, and it's the intangibles that bring them back. They want to work with Marines. So, yes, I have some challenges, but they're really not concerned with the money, honestly. It's to return for the intangibles on almost every case, both contractor and GS employee.
Okay, very good. Thanks. And Lars, how about the
Yes, so again, very small footprint of instructors. Those that we have, we give to, for example, Corey Station, enlisted instructors. there's really no contract instructors that we hire specifically other than for kind of niche things that we have for dynamic training requirements in garrison, et cetera. Obviously, we have for the folks who teach our JOs at the undergraduate level and for cyber, those are both active duty and civilian. And I would agree, I think having the active duty component is huge. We all know we struggle to get contractors in general at the right kind of quality level at the rates that get thrown around. And a lot of that is, contracting lingo and problems with, hey, whether it's lowest cost technically feasible or whatever the other requirements are. So things like, just creative ways to put things like floor rates on rates in vehicles is something that we've been exploring. Because the problem of underbidding is just seemed to have gotten worse, at least in this domain. At the unclassified level, we have a little bit of flexibility when you require the POIs and all that jazz, and you can, the contractors can offer a little more dollars, but in the end of the day, it's still difficult. So I personally think that, contracting and getting contractors puts us at a disadvantage versus using the military for a lot of these things in a short-term time. But you have to have contracts to be able to do some of this stuff, too. There's no way around it.
You certainly need them to help you scale quickly.
100%.
You don't have the green suiters in the force or the military in the force. Can I have another question, please?
Oftentimes, schoolhouse instructor duty has been staffed by individuals the operational units can't afford to lose for a few years. With the focus on training skills that are highly specialized and atrophy rapidly, how are you ensuring that the instructor cadre is composed of the best and the brightest your service has to offer?
Yeah, well, so a couple dimensions there. Our first challenge is that General Kraft is departing our scene, right? Because this is part of what he wanted to get changed, I think, is the proportion of the force that is in the operational side versus brought back. So once again, Todd, you want to lead off with this one? This has to do with just where we are with respect to keeping the right guys in our ranks for instruction.
Yeah, so I mean, this is another one of the big ideas that a couple of former chiefs of staff of the Army years ago, and looking at moving the headquarters of our Army Cyber Command to Fort Gordon, co-located. And so we have a unique relationship with Army Cyber Command, and they are very clear. I mean, there's no confusion on either the institutional side or the operational side that we need highly qualified operators to create those highly qualified operators. And so it is an investment that is made by the operational force. There's also a key understanding that your best operator doesn't automatically mean your best instructor either. And so there's some other skills that have to work there. I'll land on this, that the other unique thing that we have on the cyber side, we don't have this on the EW side, is that we're able to do two things, one today, the second more so in the future. So individuals that have qualified for financial incentives based on their qualifications of some of the higher end work roles, when they come over to the schoolhouse, are able to maintain that incentive pay. And so we're not asking you to move from being an operator to come and be an instructor, and oh, by the way, you're paying that cost. So that's been a huge thing that we've done on the cyber side. The other thing is, as we kind of fill out our instructor ranks on the cyber side, the ability for individuals to, when they're not on podium, to be able to just drive on the other side of post and get back into operations to keep them blued is a reality that the Army's been able to work. And I think some of our other service partners as well, because we have a considerable number of Navy, Air Force, Marine personnel in operations on Fort Gordon as well. And so we're looking at, continue to exploit that model.
Joe?
So in my community, we understand that if you want the best students from the schoolhouse, you send me the best people to teach. Right, so we only take the top of the crop of the SMEs from the force, and they have to get signed off on by the local commanders that they are a subject matter expert before we will take them as an instructor. Now, not all of those folks will do well in the instructor block. They usually end up in academics or ops or in the other sections. So the ones that can teach well end up on the block. The ones that don't do so well on the block end up building the curriculum. And that comes with some incentives too. So if you come and you have a successful tour as a rock solid instructor, we're going to brief that on the board for your promotion. And I'm looking to give you your choice of duty station when you leave Sunny 29 Palms for coming to that interesting location in the first place. As far as continuing their operational relevance, they continue to train while they're there in between cycles, and the amount of forces that pump through large-scale exercises at 29 Palms gives us an opportunity to put them on the watch floors and in the CPs with those deployable units that come in and doing force-on-force, much as you do at the National Training Area. So they don't lose any operational relevance. And in fact, I turned out a better SME to the fleet than they gave me in the first place because they had to learn more to teach more.
Excellent. Yeah, very good. Lars, anything to add to this?
Just briefly, I think Todd hit a point that I wanted to say, that the best operators aren't necessarily the best instructors or the best teachers if it's formal education, et cetera. And we found that. And it's more importantly, how do we take the best operators to transfer their knowledge to those individuals, but maybe not be the formal instructors. And that could be through a variety of ways. We do it, for example, we have folks do exercises with the cyber mission teams, whether it's like Cyber Guard, Cyber Flag, that kind of stuff. We bring our cadets up and enlisted members who might be interested in it, while they can sit next to the operators and kind of, through osmosis learn some, but maybe that operator is not the best person to preach. And so they can help with curriculum development. There's all these things that those top-notch operators can do, but they may not be the best teachers. So I think it's almost two separate pools of people. And if we look at it that way, it's really not as bad, right? Certainly we want them to come back if they want to. Just there's a little bit of personal desire there that's needed to be that effective instructor or teacher.
Yeah, you brought up the topic of curriculum developer, as have the rest of you. So you want to comment for just a moment, if you would, on, and Lars, we can start with you in this time, on the need for dynamic curriculum, the POI changes.
Yeah, so that's the way we operate, right? So we've always just kind of followed the joint curriculums for our teams and for folks in general, just because we sort of have to, because it has to be a CPT. But in the end of the day, we all know that it's a little fluffy, right? So there has to be some level of dynamic ability for the teams at the lowest level to shift around what they need to know while still, I hate to say it, but checking the box for IOC and FOC. That's okay, because we all have that. And ideally, we'll get to some point where this is, training an F-16 pilot and they check the box and they're ready to go. But we're just not there yet in this domain, and I don't see us getting there no differently than you're never going to be able to check the box on a doctor. It requires continuous training and education on the latest, procedures. So anyway, that's where we're kind of at.
Okay. Joe, do you have any comment on that, on the POI dynamicness?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the opening statement, we have, at my schools, we have complete control over our POIs. We own them. We don't own the TNR standards, the training and readiness standards. So we have, and when we participate in those panels as boards to change those, we deliberately make them generic enough that I can change my POI and still make the TNR. And that's the key. If those TNR standards were set so tight as to, operator must turn on switch on 117 Golf, then guess what? I can never change my POI. But we deliberately put those rather vague in order to constantly update. And we update every POI on a minimum on an annual basis. A minimum. Sometimes they go on a 6-month basis so we can keep pace with technology and the pacing threat.
And Todd, I know where your heart lies on this matter of programs of instruction, but go ahead for the record.
So when I think of change in this environment, I really think of 3 V's, velocity, volume, and violence. So the velocity of change, if you think of Moore's Law, what is quantum going to mean to that? So what is AI going to mean to that? And so the velocity of change is about to go exponential. Number 2, the volume of change. Because with 5G and other manners, we've seen the Internet of Threats, Internet of Things. The ubiquitous nature, there's just more and more that is connected. So the velocity and the volume, and I think we're going to see the violence of newer technologies. So today, right, wrong, or indifferent. I come from a signal background, and I know on the comm side, it's expensive to pure fleet new technology on top of the legacy that we've been paying for. Ma'am, you lived that for many, many years as a CIO and the G6. But as we look at new technologies coming out, I think we're going to see more violence where they are going to take the place and force us to have to make that move. And so the cyber school, much like what Joe was talking about, we are not on a 3-year curriculum update. Out of necessity, when we stood up the branch, because we were told by the Chief of Staff of the Army at the time in 2014 that the first class we would present would be probably fall of 2017. And then he called back 3 weeks later, and we were actually getting brand new lieutenants next spring. And so this was November, and so what we did was we crowdsourced our curriculum development on GitLab, and we've left it there. And so individuals in our operational force, in fact, we've opened some up, and so we do allow some others to look at it, but they're able to look at our curriculum that is in GitLab and able to make recommended changes like you would to software. And our instructors will look at it. If it is something that requires no additional instructor preparation nor costs anything, we commit that right away, and that actually gets instituted the very next time the class is instructed. If it takes retraining or updating or costs, then we prepare it, and as soon as we have those things on hand, we commit it. And so very similarly, because we're not on a task condition standard based, we don't have to say that you're turning this knob and they have to do it to this standard. And so our POIs are not that tight. The lessons plans are, the POIs are not. And so we spin quite a bit within them, and we have to.
I'm checking signals from our director of training who has to vet all of this going up. Ed, you're okay with it, right? Yeah, he's worn you down. Okay. How about another question, please?
Do any of your service cyber training courses have the flexibility of a modular design model to allow students who completed DoD internships, earned industry certifications, or have proven work role competencies to fast track or get constructive credit, get to the operational force faster?
Okay, process file. There's one too many ors in there, but we're going to take it anyway because I see at least one of our panelists is ready to jump on this one, but I'm going to pull a fake out and see. Joe, do you have any answer to that one? Go ahead.
We do have the ability for anyone who already demonstrates proficiency to test out specific courses and get to the fleet faster. We found that it hasn't always been value added when you're shortening a 6 or 4 month course with the rest of the cohort. So we do it, but not very often.
Okay, Lars?
Yeah, we do it. We do it quite frequently. That's because, again, the ad hoc nature that we've come from. And it has to be carefully done, but I think in a lot of situations it's warranted because, again, we're just not there yet where we can say you have it or you don't have it. There's a lot of gray space.
Okay. And Todd?
Yeah,
concur?
Quite similar. However, I'll just take it one step further. That once an individual, so one of the challenges we find is we've built our curriculum in modules, and so we will have individuals that either get constructive credit because they already have a CISSP certification, and that may be a module, and so we give them constructive credit. Or there may be another course that they try to test out, and if they pass the exam, then yes. What we haven't found, however, is most people don't do those, and they've got contiguous blocks. So what do you do with the individual? We just don't have enough instructors to then personalize their training, though some have graduated early, and we do work that. And so much to the chagrin of some of the students, when they say, okay, I got constructive credit for that, can I leave? Because otherwise it's a waste of my time. Sometimes, and I know this is heartbreaking, but we have to remind them that it's not all about them anymore, right? They're in the military. And the military is made up of teams. And so one of our first challenges is if you're really good at this, find your fellow student who's not really good at this, and how do you help them to be better at this? Because that's what the military is all about.
Let me re-attack 1 sec on that.
Go.
So the reason why we don't do it very often and we keep them in the cohort is because we deliberately synchronize our chief's course at the E6 level and the warrant officer courses as they're coming through for their advanced courses. We synchronize their capstones with the entry level. So the staff sergeants and the warrant officers are in there supervising and teaching the Marines that they're going to possibly have when they get to the fleet. That's why we try to keep those cohorts together, and we've seen a dramatic increase in proficiency of the capstone because of that.
Okay, very good. How about another one? Another question, please.
Do the services members embrace joint cyber training, or is there a reluctance that requires attention to ensure that all members get the best training possible? And how about recruiting and retaining instructors?
Okay, any reluctance? Lars, can you want to speak to that? Are you reluctant?
I think the question was, are our students reluctant to go to joint training? No. I mean, I would tell you at least our members are very excited to get out and work across different services and the interagency, quite frankly. It just takes them out of their comfort zone, so if they're eager to learn, then they generally are very excited to do it.
Okay. Joe?
Yeah, no reluctance. We like sweeping the commander's cups at all your bases anyway.
Todd?
So I'll say any reluctance, and normally I don't see this at our entry courses, but if I do, it's because somebody has kind of poured in a reason to be reluctant. It's almost, if you think back, if you've served, you made a decision one day that you were going to serve in the military, and you may not have picked a branch, but as soon as you picked your branch, that was the best branch. None of the other branches matter. And then as soon as you got into your career field, that was the best one and no one else mattered. And so if we don't go down that path, I do not see that either from my instructors that we have. Again, we enjoy the Marine instructors that we have, nor do I see that from our initial entry. They are about doing the job that they've been brought into, and it is a joint mission for us, and we're very much focused at that.
Good. Okay, another question, please.
Colonel Broom mentioned the Marine Corps was updating their POIs on a more frequent basis. With that being said, have you seen an issue with submitting more than one POI or product at a time, or with submission of growth? If so, how have you overcome those issues?
Well, as a commanding officer, Joe, you want to explain how the Marine Corps operates as far as approving POIs?
Yeah, so yes, I always have to sign off on the POIs. I have subordinate commanders that do it for me, and we are bounded by training days. But we do take a wide variety of input because all three of the MEFs have different priorities and there are different alignments towards specific things and missions that they have. And if you were to talk to a MU or the new Marine Logistics Regiment standing up, they have very specific things they want to see that we cannot insert to the training because writ large across the Marine Corps, we're not seeing that. So I'd have to go to a common denominator in all my courses at the schoolhouse. Where I get to flex that is at the satellite campuses. So if you're a commander at any of the other bases and you want a specific course taught, and it doesn't even have to be a Marine-specific course, I can pull that in from anywhere, hand it over to my instructors, and they will teach that. You just provide the gear at the three comm training centers. So I think it's a great model, and we get maximum flexibility out of that.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question there, and then I'll follow up with a last question. Do we have a question from AFC Ask?
That is the last question that we have from the audience. Back to you.
Okay, well, just in time. All right, so one of the things we were chatting about before was agility, and we've kind of pulled that thread a couple of times in this discussion so far. At the Cyber Center of Excellence, we took a deliberate turn toward theory, if you will, to add and complement the training that we have historically done. And I'm talking primarily on the signal or communication side, but it extends across as a philosophy for all of the cyber COE. So what I'd like to do, Todd, if you would lead off first, talk about that issue of agility and the balance between training and education, between practical application and theory.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's something that we continue to try to balance. You know when you're not in balance. and I've watched this again. I'll go back. You talked reference like on the signal side. So as the Army was in two countries fighting a war with other services, we went to a model, the Army Force Generation model, which was also faced with rapid equipping and providing more and more different sets of radios. I'll bring it to that side, right? And so what we were getting from commanders was, you're not sending us individuals that know how those radios work because there's so many different variants. And so what slowly happened is theory was pulled out because it appeared what we needed to do is ensure those 25 uniforms, for example, had hands on each radio type, not knowing where they would get stationed. We found out that didn't work either, because then we were getting still calls from the commanders saying, you're not training, this radio XYZ. And we looked in the POI, and actually we did. It was the fourth of 17 different radios. And of course, the soldier didn't remember because it was, right, it was memorization, so very low on Bloom's taxonomy. And so the signal school, I know, has moved much toward, we had the benefit of that as we stood up the cyber school to look at what is an educational model. In fact, I recall a Colonel, Paul Stanton, being in a conference with me saying that the cyber school does not train my soldiers. I train my soldiers. The cyber school educates them so that when they arrive, I can then train them on what it is they're using today, which I can almost guarantee you was different when you got ready to leave, sir. And so there's got to be a balance. You've got to do some training to demonstrate that you understand and you're proficient in the theory that you learned. And it's probably a little different when you go from cohorts, the difference between enlisted soldiers, your warrant officers, and then your O-grade officers. And so it is a balance that we know that where we have that right balance. When I reach back to someone like Chief O'Reilly and he says, yes, you're sending us the right people that we need, and we continue that cycle.
So I say it depends on the MOS and the course that we're teaching. So we are, first of all, the Marine Corps makes a difference in training and education, and that training is MOS specific and education is professional military education. So those are two different things to us. And you will do both, by the way, at specific grades. But with reference to specific courses, we teach a lot of theory in some and a lot of hands-on with specific gear in others. As an example, for networkers, they're going to get a lot more theory, and then we're going to close up the course with practical application on the gear and software sets we're currently using, because we expect them to be able to adapt to the new versions and new gear as that comes out. Radio a little bit much less so, because we buy radios on a lot less cycle. Ground electronics maintenance, for example, they're going almost pure theory now to be able to repair pretty much anything they touch instead of learning to repair the gear that we have. Because in our new advanced base operations plan, expeditionary advanced base operations plan, they may have to pick up something and scrounge something and repair something they've never seen before. So theory is pretty important for them, as well as they could get a piece of gear in the field that has been fielded, such as a robot or something like that they haven't touched. So understanding the theory of repair as opposed to I've seen this piece of gear and I fixed it before is very important.
Excellent. Lars, how about for the Coast Guard?
Yeah, so there's no stock answer for us either. I would say, because we have been traditionally a very ad hoc training environment, it's both, right? And we always try, at least I have tried, to look at what individual weaknesses are. I know that's hard to do from a macro level with the other services, but ours are kind of more geared towards individual training plans and the level that they're at and what they might need. And, hey, do you need a hands-on pen testing certification because maybe you understand the theory but you don't have any practical knowledge that you're going to need? Or I've already been an operator for several years, but kind of having the theoretical background coupled with possibly education is what I might need. And this is just true because, again, we had at the enlisted level so many different rates doing operations and so many different officer backgrounds coming in. So we had to take a very kind of dynamic approach to the individual, and we're still doing that, and it's not great, but it sometimes works. But as we work towards the kind of more standard curriculum development for first the enlisted members, then the warrant officers, and then ultimately the junior officers, we'd like to get to that place that's balanced across their various levels and what they're likely to do in their career sets.
Okay, well, that wraps it up for us. First, I want to thank the panel members for your very frank, open discussion. We have a question from the field. Go ahead. Captain Ternisi on behalf of Italy. Big quit. Wow. This looks like a good question for the reception following.
Yeah.
But I'm going to allow, let's see, our panel member to take a swing.
I'll take a swing.
Go ahead, Joe.
Anyone in command, especially anyone training right now, should be very aware of generational studies and what motivates the current generation. Because most of us in this room are either Gen Xers or Boomers, and what motivates Gen Z and Millennials is completely different. Okay, I just received a recent brief on that now. And I will tell you now that the young men and women coming into your service, they were sold on some of the intangibles, but also some tangibles about service. But on the intangibles, they want a voice, they want to be heard, they want to participate, and they very much want a task, and they want to be allowed to do that task. Rote memorization and hard command, or hard control rather, that does not work well on this generation. Now, I understand most of us in this room came from military where that was not the case. So understanding your current generation, adapting to it at the same time, making sure they adapt to your culture and bring out the best of both is probably a better approach.
I think that's an excellent answer. And panel members, do you concur?
Yeah, so
go ahead.
I'll just add one piece to it because I get the benefit, like my panel members here do as well, of talking to these new soldiers when they come in. And one of the things I like to tell them and get their kind of expression, and normally it's like, it's interesting that some of them don't get it and they pass it on. I'll look at them and say, so you've been called the trophy generation. And there's some of it that have not heard that. And then somebody will start and then you get around and then I'll say, actually, I don't think you're the trophy generation. I think it's your parents were the trophy generation. And where we're seeing that is this old person, right, expectation that they just want to be awarded or rewarded. So first, I will tell you, so do you, right? So this is the home of the masters. So we have probably a lot of driving ranges. So go out to a driving range one day and look for the older folks that are out there. And when they hit it really far and really straight, you watch and tell me if they don't look around and see if somebody didn't recognize that. We all want recognition, number one. Number two, because parents have ensured that everyone gets a trophy, the more highly skilled are absolutely turned off by that. So do they want to be recognized for what they did? Absolutely, just like you or I do. But they do not strive in an environment where everyone gets the same recognition. And so we've got to understand how to manage talent and how to award it appropriately. And that's another thing the military has not done very well. It's a different culture. Absolutely.
Well said. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that concludes our time here. How about a round of applause for our panel members? And AFCEA, thank you for pulling this panel together. Mike, over to you.
Please welcome Mike Warlick back to the stage to formally thank them on behalf of AFCEA and our audience.
Wow. First thing I've got to say, Bob, is Brigadier General Stanton cherishes you. And it's great to be working with you again. It really is. Haven't seen you in a while, and you put together a great panel today. Bob, Todd, Colonel Broom, Commander McCarter, thank you for the contributions you made this afternoon at this session. You've heard this before. You're going to hear it again, that FC will make a donation on your behalf to the Fisher House to help some of our wounded warriors, as many as we can. I've got a few comments I'd like to make just to wrap up today so you know where we're going from here. And I do realize that I'm the one standing between you and happy hour. The happy hour today will be on the Riverwalk, and it will be a poster show. There'll be 5 colleges out there with students that want to talk to you about what their thesis is. So if you get a chance with a glass of wine or a beer or whatever, go up and see them. They're going to come out and be in your workforce soon. I want to thank everybody here and those that are not here for your support this week, both attending, supporting, and trusting AFCEA with delivery of an important program, because we really think this is important. There's no two ways about it. Nationally, internationally, it's all important. Cyber education, research, and training is really a big ball, and there's a lot in between every one of those to make things happen. But wait, there's more. Tomorrow we're going to start at 8 a.m. right here with a keynote by the new CG of our Cyber, Lieutenant General Maria Barrett. You don't want to miss that. You want to find out what's on her mind right off the bat, because she's been in command, I think, less than 7 days. So we're honored to have her be here tomorrow. The exhibit floor is closed now. You don't want to go down there. It's a dangerous place. They're cleaning it up. Everything will be conducted up here tomorrow. And I'm just going to run down the sessions that you'll have. If you go to fca.org and open that up, you'll see TechNet Cyber, and it's got the schedule on there if you're not following it. At 9 a.m., after General Barrett, we'll host an enduring pandemic impact to the cyber workforce panel led by Nancy Lomero, who works for CISA, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. She's quality, and she's got a quality panel. You won't want to miss that. At 10:15, Eric Toller, who many of you know in this audience, the executive director of the Cyber Center at Augusta U, is going to lead a panel entitled "Promoting STEM in a Rapidly Changing World in Education." And you heard a lot about that up here on stage today and previous panels. And finally, at 11:45 tomorrow, which I think is another highlight of the week, Command Sergeant Major Cheryl Lyon will moderate the most senior joint Command Sergeant Major panel that maybe ever been held. There's 7 or 8. I'm not sure which one it'll be tomorrow. But they're going to tackle the topic, which is near and dear to every one of us here, training and retaining the enlisted workforce. If they can't figure it out, nobody can. And 7 or 8 of them together are going to figure this out tomorrow. So I think we've got a great program tomorrow. Again, it'll all be in this classroom here, this theater session. And enjoy the afternoon. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you tomorrow.